She posts, she scrolls, she waits. Another selfie, another caption about self-love, another quote about independence. And still, every time the screen lights up, her pulse rises, just for a second, as if that tiny burst of digital validation could fill the emptiness she refuses to name. Because this is the age of attention, and attention has replaced affection. We no longer love to connect, we love to be seen. The modern woman doesn't crave love the way her grandmother did. She craves recognition. Proof that she matters, that she's still relevant, that she still exists in the eyes of others. And the world has made that easy. Too easy. Endless platforms designed to feed the illusion of connection. Every heart, every like, every view. A microdose of significance. But like any drug, it wears off fast. That's why silence hurts so much now. Not because she's lonely, but because silence means she's invisible. When the likes slow down, when the comments fade, when the man who once responded in seconds now takes hours, the panic sets in. Not emotional, but existential. She doesn't miss him. She misses what his attention said about her. That she was wanted, desired, relevant. Because in a world where value is measured by visibility, disappearing from someone's attention feels like death. She'll call it heartbreak. But it's not love she's mourning. It's the loss of her reflection. See, modern validation doesn't connect people. It fragments them. It teaches her to love herself through other people's eyes. To measure her worth by reactions, not reality. To chase the high of being noticed instead of the peace of being known. And that's why modern women cry when they don't get attention. Not because they're weak, but because attention has become oxygen and silence feels like suffocation. The irony? She's surrounded by more people than ever before, but she's never felt more unseen. Because attention isn't intimacy, it's performance, and the audience she built for herself can't hold her when she's alone. So she posts again. Another story, another caption, another plea, disguised as confidence. All to hear one simple thing from the void. I see you. But the truth she doesn't want to face is this. If your sense of worth depends on being seen, you'll spend your whole life performing for people who were never watching. And when the applause stops, the silence will feel like punishment. But it's not. It's the truth. And the truth is this. Attention was never love. It was just noise that kept her from realizing she never learned how to love herself without an audience. Every addiction starts the same way, with a feeling that feels too good to question. For her, it wasn't a substance. It was attention. The first compliment. The first double tap. The first message that made her heart skip. Tiny moments, harmless on the surface. But underneath, they began to rewire her. Because validation is a drug disguised as love, and the modern world gives it away for free. Every post is a performance, every like, a small applause, and the moment she feels that hit of recognition, that surge of dopamine that whispers, "You matter," she's hooked. She doesn't realize it yet, but her self-worth just shifted from internal to external, from peace to performance, from being enough to being seen as enough. Now, every notification carries emotional weight. Every silence feels like rejection. She tells herself she's just having fun, just being confident. But deep down she knows she's not expressing herself anymore. She's advertising herself. And that's the quiet tragedy of modern validation. It never satisfies. It only stimulates. Because real connection fills you. Validation drains you. She scrolls through comments and DMs, seeing hundreds of people telling her she's beautiful, powerful, desired, and still she feels empty. Because deep down, she knows what they're reacting to isn't her. It's the image of her. a version built for attention, not affection. And attention without affection is just noise pretending to be love. The more she gets, the less it means. The more eyes on her, the more unseen she feels. That's how the high turns into hunger. Soon, the dopamine hit that used to last all day barely lasts an hour. Now she needs more likes, more comments, more replies, more validation to prove she's still relevant. And in that cycle, love becomes impossible, because she doesn't know how to be still long enough to feel anything real. When someone tries to love her for who she is, she doesn't know how to accept it, because real love doesn't spike her brain. It feels too quiet, too stable, too boring. So she goes back to the noise, to the crowd, to the high. And this time, she doesn't even pretend it's about connection. She just wants to feel alive. But every hit of validation is really a reminder of withdrawal waiting to happen, because no amount of attention can fill the void left by the absence of self-worth. And deep down, she knows it. That's why the sadness comes. That's why the tears fall. Not because nobody sees her, but because she built her entire identity on needing to be seen. It starts slowly. The notifications fade. The messages stop coming as often. The mirror doesn't hit the same. And suddenly, the silence feels louder than any compliment ever did. She calls it bad mood. She calls it feeling off. But what she's really feeling is withdrawal, because the brain doesn't care if validation comes from love or attention. It treats both like a chemical high. And when that high disappears, the crash is brutal. She doesn't miss the people. She misses the feeling they gave her, that little spark that said, you matter, you're still desirable, you still exist. Now, there's just quiet. And quiet for someone addicted to noise feels like punishment. So she reaches again, posts another photo, writes another caption, searches for another conversation to drown the emptiness. But the dopamine doesn't hit the same. The likes come slower, the replies sound emptier, and the silence between them gets longer. That's when panic starts to creep in. Because attention was never supposed to be her lifeline. But somewhere along the way, it became the only thing keeping her identity afloat. Now she stares at her reflection, but doesn't recognize the woman looking back. Without the eyes of others on her, she doesn't know who she is. That's the cost of living for validation. You lose your sense of self the moment the world stops clapping. And the more she feels unseen, and the more desperate her attempts become. The clothes get tighter, the captions get deeper, the energy gets louder. But no matter how much she shows, she can't feel seen. Because the attention she craves isn't admiration, it's affirmation. And affirmation can't come from strangers. It has to come from within. Yet she's been running from that truth for years, because facing it would mean admitting that all the attention in the world can't fill what's missing inside. So, she loops, scroll, post, refresh, repeat. Each cycle emptier than the last. Each moment of silence sharper, heavier, harder to escape. She tells herself it's the algorithm. She tells herself people just moved on. But deep down, she knows. The problem isn't that no one's watching. It's that she doesn't know how to exist without being watched. And that realization cuts deeper than heartbreak ever could. Because when attention becomes identity, silence feels like death. And that's why she cries. Not for love, not for loss, but for the unbearable quiet that reminds her that the only person who never truly paid attention to her was herself. For a while, she believed she was in control, that her beauty was power, that her attention was currency, that the world revolved around her ability to attract it. And in a sense, it did. Because modern culture taught her that validation equals value, that the more attention she commands, the more powerful she becomes, that her desirability is her weapon, and every man who looks, likes, or comments is proof she's winning. But what no one told her is that attention isn't power. It's dependence, disguised as control. Because power isn't about how many people see you, it's about how little you need to be seen. The illusion of power feels intoxicating at first. Every notification, every stare, every word of praise reinforces it. The idea that she's the one pulling the strings, that she can decide who gets her time, her smile, her body, her energy. But over time, that power begins to flip. The same people who once made her feel untouchable now make her feel replaceable. Because attention has no loyalty. It's not admiration, it's appetite. And appetite always moves on. The power she thought she had was never hers. It belonged to the crowd, and the crowd is never satisfied. That's the hidden cruelty of validation. You can't own what depends on others to exist. She thought she was collecting admiration, but she was actually collecting debt. Emotional debt, owed to a world that will always demand payment in performance. That's why she can't stop posting, why she can't stop checking who's watching, why she can't stand being ignored. Because her worth isn't internal anymore. It's leased out to attention. And every moment of silence feels like a threat of repossession. The illusion of power kept her safe from the truth. That she doesn't feel powerful. She feels dependent. That she doesn't feel adored. She feels owned. And when that illusion breaks, when the attention fades, when the crowd looks away, she doesn't feel free. She feels empty. Because control built on validation is never control. It's captivity dressed as empowerment. She'll still tell herself she's strong, still post quotes about independence, still act unbothered. But deep down she knows the same attention that made her feel alive is the same attention that made her forget who she really is. And that's the moment the illusion dies. When she finally realizes that the spotlight she craved was never shining on her. It was blinding her. When the attention fades long enough, something inside her begins to crack. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, like glass under pressure. Because attention didn't just feed her ego. It became her identity. She built her sense of self on reactions, on how people responded, how they looked at her, how they made her feel seen. Every compliment was a thread in the fabric of her self-worth. Every "you're so beautiful," every "you deserve better," stitched her confidence together. But when those voices go silent, the fabric unravels. And now, standing in front of the mirror, she doesn't see confidence, she sees confusion. Because without an audience, she doesn't know who she's performing for anymore. That's the collapse. Not losing followers, not losing attention, but losing definition. Because identity built on perception dies the moment perception changes. She used to think she was empowered, that she was free, that she didn't need anyone. But empowerment that relies on applause isn't freedom. It's captivity dressed as confidence. Now, every silence feels like exposure. Every quiet moment feels like a question she can't answer. Who am I without being desired? Who am I without someone watching? And when she can't answer, the panic sets in. Because the same validation that once made her feel alive has now left her dependent, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. She's trapped in the paradox. She craves peace, but peace feels like invisibility. She wants love, but real love doesn't perform. So she sabotages herself, choosing chaos over calm, drama over depth, noise over truth. Because at least chaos feels like something. That's the modern tragedy, a generation raised to chase validation, now terrified of silence. Because silence means reflection. And reflection means seeing the truth. That the person she became for attention isn't the same person she was meant to be. When the applause stops, when no one's looking, when her posts don't echo anymore, she's left with a question that no algorithm can answer. Do I still exist if no one sees me? And that's when she finally cries. Not because she's unloved, but because she's finally alone with the one person she's avoided her entire life, herself. In the end, it always comes back to silence. Not as punishment, not as revenge, but as truth. Because attention was never the problem. The problem was believing it could replace meaning. For years she thought being desired was the same as being loved. That being seen was the same as being understood. That being followed was the same as being valued. But now, sitting in the quiet, she feels the difference. Attention fades, love endures. Attention excites, connection calms. Attention feeds the ego, love feeds the soul. And for the first time, she realizes how much of her life was spent chasing noise, chasing the flicker of validation, the illusion of relevance, the shallow comfort of being seen. But the truth is this: attention has never healed anyone. It only distracts you long enough to avoid the real wound, the absence of self-worth. When no one's watching, she finally feels it. The ache of a life built on borrowed eyes. Every like, every compliment, every message. They were all bandages on a wound that never closed. And now, without them, she's forced to see what's underneath. The silence isn't empty. It's honest. It doesn't say, "You're not enough." It says, "You've been enough all along. You just forgot." Meanwhile, the man who walked away doesn't gloat. He doesn't celebrate her breakdown or take pride in her sadness. He just lives, calmly, quietly, intentionally. Because his peace isn't about her. It's about him. He learned that attention is the cheapest form of power and that peace is the rarest form of strength. He stopped performing, stopped proving, stopped explaining. And in doing so, he became what she could never control. A man who doesn't need to be seen to exist. That's the final irony. The woman who lived for attention will always crave the man who doesn't need it. Because his silence carries the one thing her world never gave her: substance. So when the tears come, not out of heartbreak, but out of realization, it's not because she lost him. It's because she finally sees herself clearly. And in that reflection, she understands what attention could never give her: peace.